Hello and welcome to the very first HEMA Fight book review. Specifically, we are going to be going over the Scheilhau in detail by Alexander Frigert, and we are going to be going over it because not only does it talk about the Scheilhau in depth, how to do it, how to train it, and specifically how to apply it, but also because there's a little section in the back that perfectly interested me about tactics and strategy. So I'm going to be going over some reviews of some previous footage I have of people who do really good Scheilhaus and go over a little bit the tactics and strategy portion of the book with just a little bit of a visual aid. Now, to start us off, the book gives us a brief introduction on the basic overall concept of strategy, namely what I have said on this channel repeatedly, which is that you have to have a game plan loop. You have to have an idea of what kind of fencing you want to be doing and have an idea of what kind of fencing your opponent is doing, and then try to meet those in the middle. So, in this book, there are several sections basically laid out as a type of fencer that your opponent might be, and then the response underneath of it is what kind of Scheilhau you can be using to respond to that style of fencer. And the first one is the suicidal fencer. Now, I don't like to throw any kind of shade like that. I don't like to call anybody suicidal, but the idea is still there. Someone who comes in at you, wants to throw one big, really single time action straight towards your head and deliver that cut at the exact same time as they hopefully don't get hit at the same time, but probably will anyway. Generally, the game plan of the suicidal fencer is you're going to back up, try to snipe them on the hand or on the leg, and by going in deep straight to your head, well, they're going to get the better of the points most likely. Also, it's a great way of forcing someone into a defensive mindset, which might be able to be capitalized on later. But as you see in this clip, I do a pretty okay job of using my Scheilhau to completely deter a suicidal attack. Not necessarily a suicidal fencer, but one who was being a little suicidal in that moment. And the idea here is that, just as the book says, the Scheilhau is really, really good for executing this particular kind of technique against this particular kind of fencer. Why? Because the Scheilhau does what the Scheilhau says that it does in all the text. It defends and attacks simultaneously, specifically really well in the high line. So the idea here is that if you see someone and you know they're going to charge you, chances are they're going to throw something to your high line because that's where all your deep targets are. That's where all your best scoring targets are. So if you can successfully close off that line and attack at the exact same time, you have a really, really good chance of at the very least defending yourself from the attack that you know is coming at the exact same time as you present a credible threat that they might just run into, as you see here. Now, the book goes into a little bit more detail that I'd like to get onto, but for the most part, this is really the end of the interaction with the suicidal fencer. What you're really trying to do is guess what is going to happen and make sure to throw your own attack a little bit before they throw theirs, generally while they're starting their charge. Since obviously in a tournament we start from outside of measure, they have to charge at least 1 or 2 steps before they're in range to actually throw their attack, and that charging footwork really is your cue to throw the Scheilhau, not their attack itself. It's very important to be the first one to the bind, so to speak, in this interaction, because if you are a little bit too slow, well, their speed and their aggression might just be more than enough to cleave through some part of your Scheilhau and hit you at the same time, and you don't want to respond to suicidal fencing with your own, I don't know if I'm going to defend myself, but I do know I'm going to land style technique. Now, the second archetype that the book goes over is the zeropter archetype, and this is one that's actually pretty common in the world of HEMA, but ironically, in my opinion, it is also an archetype of fencer that actually lends itself very nicely to a Scheilhau opener, just as much as it lends itself to someone who likes to throw zeropters overall as a counter. So it was a little hard to find a really good clip of this, but of course, I had to go to Miro Latella as a really great source of someone who loves to Scheilhau. But Miro throws his Scheilhau in a rather interesting way. If you've ever taken one of his seminar classes or just watched him fence for a long time, you know that he actually has several different variations of a Scheilhau that he will throw in certain situations, and one of them is the one in this clip, one in which he throws his Scheilhau rather like a right Zverkau from cold open. And the reason I wanted to use this clip in response to the zeropter archetype was for 2 reasons. One, the idea of there being a real difference between a zeropter, as in someone who loves to throw zeropters one after the other, to the point where they generate lift, is really not fundamentally strategically different from someone who just uses a Zwerchau one time appropriately, especially when it fits all the archetypal markers of someone who just wants to throw an initial Scheilhau or initial Zwerchau to land at their target. So, in this exchange, we see Miro inch a little bit into range, see his opponent, Jeremy Pace, by the way, is gesturing up high with his sword, and it looks like he's just going to kind of stand there. Miro throws his Scheilhau, Zwerchau-y kind of thing, over the top, but then curves it in to get that 45-degree angle that comes in towards the side of the head. And the reason that he's doing this is he's trying to race Jeremy's cron position. Jeremy is very clearly trying to parry this by just shoving his hands up into the air. And the reason that this kind of sideways, more angular Scheilhau is a little bit more beneficial is it's not taking the path that the cron is necessarily interrupting. So again, I don't have a great example of a Zwerchau archetype here, but what I'm trying to point out here is that from this position where Jeremy tried to throw a cron, if he had managed to land that parry, he absolutely would have gone into a Zwerchau style situation. It would absolutely be his prerogative to, once he had gotten his opponent's blade up into the air, to seek the targets on the lower left and lower right sides, using the Zwerchau's ability to defend what comes from above and simultaneously hit, to just pepper his targets with as many Zwerchaus as he could fit into the span of a few seconds. This is the setup for the Zwerchau archetype, and so I think it's very important to point out here why it is that Miro has adjusted his Scheilhau specifically to try to get around that. The book, of course, talks about the fact that the Zwerchau is a slightly shorter range technique than the Scheilhau, and the Zwerchau requires that kind of momentum style situation where you need either one good bind or one good parry to really start you off. So, if you want to get around the Zwerchau archetype, you should do exactly what Miro does here and start making slight adjustments to the angle of approach of your Scheilhau so that you can adjust it to different situations and get in around the parried or defensive bind technique that your opponent is trying to play so that they can enter then the Zwerchau state of ascension where they can just beatbox your ribs until you quit. Now, the next archetype on the list is the thrusting archetype, and this is, in my opinion, one that was usually really common back in the day, but has become a little bit less common now. By back in the day, I, of course, am showing footage from 2019's New Amsterdam HEMA Open, where I took a very nasty thrust straight to the mask. And of course, in taking such a thrust, I was very much facing a thrusting archetype style of fencer. This was very common, as I said, back in the day, because most people who were right-handed would just sit in left plow and really go for those deep thrust with the lockouts. The reason, of course, being is that at the time, long point was the most dominant tournament format in the entire region, and they included a thing called a control point, where you would get bonus points, up to 4 sometimes, if you managed to land a thrust to a deep target and lock out your opponent's blade at the same time. It meant that these left plow to left plow jousting matches happened all the time. As such, in this particular scenario, I do not throw a Scheilhau, and as a result, I get stabbed in the face really, really hard. But I have another piece of footage that I'm hoping can kind of bring the context together and splice together in your mind to make you understand what kind of response I should have done. Now, for the second clip, I'm fighting my friend JJ, and JJ is someone who I land Scheilhaus on all the time, specifically because he loves to do those kind of offsetting big parries that make him that little bit more vulnerable to thrusts to the shoulders than maybe the average person would be. But the problem is that he does not fit what I would consider the thrust archetype. He fits more what I would consider the follow-up to the thrust archetype, the hand sniper archetype. So we're going to try to blend these two together, and hopefully it makes sense. But the idea here is that when you watch this clip with me and JJ, what you see is I throw a very particular kind of Scheilhau that I call the flat Scheilhau. Now, the book doesn't go into the flat Scheilhau, and I don't blame them, because at the end of the day, the flat Scheilhau is something that I kind of made up, or at the very least have learned to do based on tournament footage and format and fighting, and it's not one that exists in the historical texts. But it does have a very important feature that I think is important to consider when dealing with the thrust and the hand sniper archetype, and that is you put your thumb on the top of the blade. The reason the thumb on the top of the blade is so important for both of these scenarios is twofold. One, by putting your thumb on the top of the blade, you are putting your hand a little bit further up the sword, bringing it a little bit closer to the point of balance of the blade, and giving you, at the very least, the feeling of having a little bit more control over the strong of your sword. Control you are going to need because in both the situation of the thrusting archetype and the hand sniping archetype, the one thing you need to deal with is the strong of your blade. If someone comes in, like Matt Pond in this clip, you need to be able to put the strong of your blade onto the weak of their blade in order to set them off. That is mandatory. However, because of how quickly they're coming at your face, you need to be able to do so as quickly as possible, but with as little motion as possible. The more distance you have to travel with the strong of your blade to the side of your body, the better chance they have of being able to sneak that point directly into some part of your anatomy and get their points. At the exact same time, again, because of the old school, rules about lockouts and control points, if you try to parry a big ballistic thrust and you don't make it, well, guess what? You just gave them the lockout to their points on top of it, and you actually would have been better off just hitting them in the head. So you have to be very, very precise and very, very careful. So by putting your thumb on top of the blade and keeping your quillions horizontal in front of you, it means that as you kind of windshield wiper or push the strong of your blade off to one side, you are giving yourself the best leverage, it's the strong of your blade, and the shortest amount of distance of travel. If you try to crawl up, you're going to push that blade all the way up your center line, and chances are you might not make it in time. If you go completely left or right, chances are you have to travel across your entire shoulder line, and you might not make it in time. So having your sword out in front of you, having the thumb on top of the blade, and just doing these little kind of crump style windshield wiper maneuvers is going to be your best bet of getting that point out of your face. Now, back to JJ and the hand sniper bit, the exact same position is just as beneficial for really the same reasons. When someone is trying to snipe at your hands, your strong and your quillions are the things that need to get in their way. So if you throw a Scheilhau the traditional way with your short edge down and your quillions vertical, well, there's really no hand protection there anymore. And if you do what Alexander says to do in this book and give it that little bit of an angle so that your cross guard is a little bit at a 45-degree angle, well, you have more hand protection, but still not ideal hand protection. You can still be assaulted in the hands from any of the angles that your cross guard is not currently pointed. By keeping your quillions horizontal and your thumb on top of the blade, you ensure two key things. One, when they snipe at your hands, if they do hit your crossguard, they're going to land right in the strong of your blade. Again, the place that you really want them to be if you want to defend yourself. But two, horizontal quillions means that your hands are going to be below your quillions at all times. And as long as they throw a hand shot that in any way encompasses this entire 180-degree angle of rotation, your quillions are going to be in the perfect position to defend you. They are going to be at their widest, which means they're going to defend all of your hands, plus the giant Spez lobster gloves that you have on your hands, and a little bit of your forearms. And the further forward your hands are normally, which would make them a target, means that they're actually further away and behind your quillions, making them into a kind of buckler situation where your hands, your forearms, and even all the way up to your elbows can be defended by this exact situation. So, if you are fighting the hand snipe architect or the thrusting archetype, my advice, which is relatively similar here to the book, but maybe a little bit different, is to throw these flat Scheilhaus, again, that you see in the JJ clip. I need it to be 100% clear that while I don't necessarily agree with my advice that the book still gives absolutely brilliant advice. The idea here being that the Scheilhau is a very, very unique and a very well-suited technique to setting someone off of the center line, whether that be because they tried to thrust you in the chest or because they tried to cut you in the hands. You can do Alexander's version of the Scheilhau and you're still going to get really, really good results. My only little quibble here is that chances are you might end up getting cut in the hands a little bit more than you would like to, and sometimes you might get double stabbed a little bit more than you might like to. That's just because if you really want to start using the flat Scheilhau, well, you're going to get some looks from people who really want things to stay historical because you're using the flexibility of your blade to kind of flick your tip over the top of other people's guards. But the end of the day, it is what it is. Historical swords were still kind of flexible, and more importantly, it still fundamentally uses the key components of a Scheilhau to give you the attacking and defensive qualities of each, just to a slightly more exacerbated level. Putting your thumb on top of the blade doesn't make you ahistorical, it just means that you're trying to make 100% sure that the aspects of the Scheilhau that are keeping you safe are going to keep you safe, and the aspects of the Scheilhau that keep you aggressive and keep a threat to your opponent are still there, even though you are losing the cut component of the Scheilhau and you're just focusing entirely on the thrust. So, that is going to be it for the breakdown of the Scheilhau in detail. Again, if you want to buy this book, it is available on Amazon, and it's pretty cheap, and you can probably get it in the mail within a week, as opposed to many other HEMA books. And of course, if you'd like to see more strategy tips and breakdowns, I am going to be doing those again on Thursday with a completely different fight, and hopefully one in which I won't have to splice together video from 10 years ago. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.